There is not one size fits all when it comes to 990s. It really depends on the size of the organization. Some of the smaller organizations can file a 990N, which is when they have an average of less than $50,000 in gross receipts.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It Depends, a podcast series brought to you by Handsome & Weeble. You know that if you've ever talked to an accountant, they've told you, well, it depends. This podcast series is for business owners, leaders, operators, accountants, or someone just wanting to learn more about the accounting industry. I'm your host, Clarissa Hoffman. Today, we are joined by Monty Glanzer, a partner in our A&A department. Thanks for joining us, Monty.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been with Handsome & Weeble since 2009, if I can really believe that. It's been 16 years. I've been an audit partner since 2022, and a majority of my clients are nonprofits, so I'm happy to be here to talk about 990s.
Great. Certainly an expert on the subject. Can you tell us what Form 990 is?
Well, that's a loaded question, but I'll try to just keep it simple for right now. The 990, Form 990, its official title is called the Return for Organizations Exempt from Income Tax, but we typically refer to it as an informational form, and it is required by all nonprofits to file with the IRS. The deadline is typically going to be 4.5 months after year end, so if it's December 31st year end, they'd be filing in May 15th. But there's a simple extension process to get another 6 months to be able to file. But really, there's a lot of information that goes in that return. It's not a simple return to put together, and so really encourage nonprofits to take their time, make sure the information is accurate and complete, because it provides a lot of useful information for a lot of users.
What are the different types of 990s?
So there is not one size fits all when it comes to 990s. It really depends on the size of the organization. Some of the smaller organizations can file a 990N, which is when they have an average of less than $50,000 in gross receipts. But other than that, there's really not much information that goes on the 990N. We call it a postcard because it really fits on half a page, but it's still a required filing for those nonprofits at that size.
So in that case, right, you're just checking the box that you've completed your compliance with the IRS.
That's right. It's a check the box. You might list the principal person to contact for that organization, but that's really about it.
Pretty straightforward. So what is the next tier of 990 filing?
The next tier is a 990EZ. It's going to be for organizations that have gross receipts of less than $200,000 and total assets of less than $500,000. But there's going to be more information that goes in the 990EZ than the N. It's about 4 pages long, includes more financial information, balance sheet, income statement related items. It lists out the board of directors, and it just answers some other governance type questions. But the last tier is going to be the most comprehensive. It's the full 990 for organizations that have gross receipts above $200,000 or total assets of above $500,000. But there's going to be way more information that goes into that full 990 than either of the other two. It includes a lot of narratives related to the mission of the organization, the program service accomplishments that they have for that year, and financial information, balance sheet, income statement, a full page on the sources of revenue for that organization, and a full page on the functional allocation of expenses, which is a requirement. Even listing of the board of directors again, but then also providing compensation information for some of their top employees, and then at least 2 or 3 pages of other questions related to management, governance, and policies and that information. So it's quite a bit. And all of that is within the first 12 pages, which we call the core form. Mm-hmm. Addition to that, there are 16 other supplemental schedules that could be required depending on how you answer some of the questions in the core form. But I would say no one nonprofit is going to file all 16, but I would say the average of those supplemental schedules is about 2 to 5.
What is important for a nonprofit to consider when they're filling out Form 990?
So for a nonprofit, first and foremost, it's an annual filing required, so it's definitely a compliance document with the IRS. Probably more importantly, it's an opportunity to gain trust and credibility with donors, with grant makers, and just the general public, because unlike for-profit entities, the 990 return is a public document. Just about anyone who wants to look at what nonprofit filed for its 990 can look it up. And there are several places where they can access those. There's a website called Candid, it used to be called GuideStar, that posts them. There's ProPublica has a website called Nonprofit Explorer, and the IRS also posts them to their website. And if the nonprofit itself is being transparent enough, it also uploads its 990 to its website. But again, along with having complete and accurate information in putting together and having enough time to put it together, because again, it's quite a bit, it's important for the nonprofit to take the time to tell their story in the 990. I think I mentioned there's several places where there's narratives on what the mission is of that organization. There's a whole page for them to describe what their service accomplishments are for that year. And so there's an opportunity there to really provide the data and what makes that nonprofit meaningful. How do they make an impact in their community? Because not all nonprofits have the budget to put forth a full annual report with graphs and charts and all this colorful data. But there's an opportunity to put some of those same numbers. You can't add charts to 990, but you can add those numbers that show that impact that they're providing their community. So I think that's a huge opportunity for all nonprofits to focus in on.
If the 990 is an informational return, are there consequences to not filing it?
Yeah, there are some very real consequences to not filing the 990 or even filing late. That's probably the more immediate consequence. For smaller nonprofits, that for filing late, there is a daily fee or a penalty associated with that. So for smaller nonprofits, it's about $20 a day. That's capped at $16,000 per return. For larger nonprofits, it's $120 a day, but that's capped at $60,000. Those are not small numbers, so it's really important to make sure that that return is being filed on time and consistently. There are also more significant consequences when a nonprofit does not file its 990 for 3 years consecutively. If that happens, the IRS automatically revokes its tax-exempt status, which is not a good situation for any nonprofit to be in. It really means kind of three things. The nonprofit converts over to a for-profit entity, so they'd be subject to income tax. Any contributions received by that nonprofit from donors, that those donors would not be able to deduct those contributions on their tax return. And third is that the IRS lists those organizations on their revocation list, which is also a public document. There is an avenue to have your tax-exempt status reinstated, but it takes time, it takes money, and at the end of that process, the IRS is still going to say, hey, do you remember those returns that you did not file that got you into this mess? You still need to file them. You really don't want to be in that situation. So again, timely filing, avoid those late penalties, and just keep up with the reporting is going to be the best situation for sure.
Are there any instances in which a nonprofit would actually pay income tax or other taxes with their 990 filing?
Yes. If a nonprofit is following its exempt purpose, its mission, it's running programs that are related to that exempt purpose, and they're getting funding related to that exempt purpose, then there shouldn't be any income tax consequences. But if that organization decides to start operating some activities that are not related to that exempt purpose, then they would run into a situation where they'd be facing unrelated business income tax, which we say UBIT for short. There are a few different examples, quick examples of where a nonprofit could get into UBIT issues. So one is if, say for example, a museum operates a cafe or a coffee shop that's open to the general public, but it's not really related to their overall mission of the museum, which is more educational based, then the income expenses, net income, would be subject to UBIT. Maybe a more common example is a nonprofit has some extra space or an event facility that they can rent out to community or other organizations, and that building or that space is currently is being debt financed, so there's a mortgage on it, then that rental income would be subject to UBIT. Another example, which can catch nonprofits off guard, is if they are invested through these pass-through entities like an investment partnership, where then, depending on what that investment partnership has assets, what they're invested in, they can pass through unrelated business income to that nonprofit, and sometimes that comes as a surprise. The investment company is reporting that through their Schedule K-1 to the nonprofit. So the unrelated business income is reported on its own special 990 called the 990T, which is a separate filing from the normal 990 that they would file. It's basically just more like a income tax return. The net income that's reported, you can have deductions related to that activity that reduce that tax liability, but then it's 21% is what's paid on that income for the year.
Well, certainly very real and applicable examples, so thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today, Monty, about Form 990.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So, Clarissa, do you know what your next topic is going to be?
Well, it depends.